Good morning, everyone. It is 8:15 on Friday, August 7th. We are having a special council meeting this morning to get some information about the Government of Alberta's potential changes to the assessment. And so we're looking forward to the presentation today. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We have an agenda before us. Item number 2, would a councillor care to approve the agenda? Councillor Lougheed, all in favor? Councillor Vandermeer? I believe Councillor Vandermeer forgot to unmute his phone. Well, the motion carries 6-0. Item number 3, delegation.
Can I make a motion to accept John as electronically?
Yes, that would be excellent.
I make a motion to accept Councillor Vandermeer in electronically.
All
Oh,
in favor?
and our delegate Paul McLaughlin as well.
All in favor? Councillor Vandermeer?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Item number 3, delegation presentation, 3.1, Paul McLaughlin, District 2 Director, Rural Municipalities of Alberta. Welcome, Paul.
Good morning. I wish I was meeting with Clearwater County on better terms than what we're going to talk about today. But I'm just going to probably shoot from the hip a little bit if you're comfortable with that. I've been through a few presentations so far, and I think we are meeting with at least a few MLAs on Tuesday. I've lined up maybe 3 or 4 more MLAs maybe that will attend and be wallflowers on Tuesday. But if you're comfortable with me just basically shooting from the hip, I'll kind of talk to some high points from an RMA's perspective, and then maybe talk a little bit about go forward strategy if that works for council.
That works excellent, Paul. And thank you for making time here this on Friday morning.
It's raining out there, so I'm glad to be inside right now. So perfect. And just to go back to the bit of the history on this file, and I think that there's a few daggers being thrown at RMA for basically being at the table. And I think that I want to talk from RMA's perspective that basically the invite was placed to us to have a technical review of the assessment model, and I'll talk a little bit about the history of that. But we were asked to attend, and it's a technical topic, and you can see by the packages we sent you, it is rather complex. I've been a municipal leader for a long time, and trust me, this stuff I've never looked at anything in this detail in my entire career. So it's a complex topic, but I think that our role was to be participatory, and at the same time, there was a confidentiality that was attached to that. And truth be told, RMA was reluctant to participate because it's one of those situations, and the best analogy is an old school analogy by one of our more colorful counselors said that I get to go out to the bush there to pick the stick to beat my father to beat me with. Basically, we're being asked to make choices amongst poor choices. And you're being asked to actually involved with something that will probably cause undue harm to your municipality. So it's difficult to be in. That being said, we honored the confidentiality, and some of the participants did not. But I think that that's what RMA is about, is to actually honor that. We've had some criticisms for that, whether we should have been at the table or not at the table. I'm glad we were at the table. I'd rather be at the table to be ignored than to not to be at the table at all. And I think that's what's really happened in this situation. So the participants in that technical committee, and I'll call it technical committee because there was no elected leaders there, was AUMA, CAP was there, EPAC was there, Canadian Energy Pipelines Association was there, as well as the Canadian Property Taxpayers Association. That last one is interesting. I have no idea who those people are. I tried to Google the Canadian Property Taxpayers Association. I cannot figure out who those people are. How they showed up on the radar, how they even function, and I'm pretty good at searching online, and I have no idea who those folks are. How they got at this table, I have no idea. So going through that process, we had a list of recommendations, and council has been provided those in the RMA package, and hopefully you folks have all had that. And one of the real key problems is that we really don't have a multi-year analysis. So the snapshot, the package that you folks have been given is based on 1 year's data. It's not a projection forward. It doesn't really provide you the full analysis. And regretfully, I have to say, the whole concept of straight line depreciation or the depreciation models that are being advocated in these scenarios, if you actually move those out and actually model those out, this is a lot more dire than I think that even the numbers that you saw. And I think the numbers you saw was a 22% under scenario D. I'd venture to guess that it's actually quite larger than that. Your older well sites and older infrastructure would actually be aged out to the low level, that base asset, to the point that if you start looking at 5 to 10 year increments, you're looking at quite a bit larger decrease in revenue to Clearwater County. So these numbers are a snapshot of 1 year's data, and they are detrimental and pretty alarming, even just that. But I just want to make sure that people understand that we also, can you imagine negotiating with a car dealer and they refuse to tell you at all what the car looks like? Because the fact is that we've actually don't have any of the data that drives this model. That data is held by the province, and it's actually considered proprietary because in many ways it's actually competitive advantage to some of those asset owners. So just imagine that we're at the table. We had very strong technical people there that weren't able to look under the hood. They weren't able to actually look at the color of the car, but they were supposed to talk about what that car would look like. And that's really the model that they were involved in. And there's a tremendous amount of frustration by the folks involved that they continually asked for information, could not get it. At the same time, what one comment was made was, this was preordained. This had already been decided, and we were there as wall dressing for the process. And that was somebody that was involved from the RMA side. And I think that there's a lot of frustration from RMA side to actually be pulled along in this process. But I think that at the same time, our goal now is to maybe not look backwards, but let's try to make sure that we can look forwards and have a solutions-based way to address this. The other key message is that we have not had an opportunity to talk to the minister nor the premier. And I think that we are looking at that, and we actually I'm going from this emergency meeting to another emergency meeting with RMA and at 9 o'clock here. But we are trying to get in front of the minister as well as the premier too as well. 2 reasons. This is a terrible time for consultation on this file. The month of August is, you folks know quite well, the month of August is harvest time and or try to fix things that are stuck in the mud time, depending on where you're at in the province. At the same time, holidays, whether the public is around, because public's on holidays, and the public is a key piece in this whole conversation, is that the consultation is going out at the same time to elected leaders, but also to the public as well. And I'll step back one second to understand that, generally speaking, most of your ratepayers just don't understand assessment from a property standpoint, from their own farm standpoint, let alone the complexity of the assessment of industrial and commercial projects too as well. So this is a complex file that 30 days is not sufficient for consultation on something this complex. The other piece too to tell you folks too as well is that there has been these proposed technical changes. Scenario D, CAP has been publicly stated saying scenario D is the only one they will accept. Now, 2 comments on that. CAP only represents 6% of the oil and gas industry. At the same time, I'm quite unsure as what they mean by that's the only one they'll accept. What exactly will they do if that one's not chosen? What levers do they have for mechanisms? So I'm not sure what even that statement, but that's what they've said publicly. The other thing too is that CAP represents only 8% of production. And these models, because of the legacy assets and the depreciation models that are out there, these models actually favor 4 of the largest companies in the province. And generally speaking, if you start to model these out, there's a significant portion of smaller operators that are new young, new, small companies picking up new assets, they would actually pay more taxes than some of the, so this really is favorable to the larger companies. If you actually look at and model out how some of these scenarios would also help companies, these scenarios would be quite favorable to quite a few companies that we're all aware of that are still operating, still have operating licenses, and are not paying their municipal taxes at present. And there's quite a few that this is quite favorable to them as well. The other piece of the puzzle, I believe, is that this looks quite similar to some of the advocacy that's been done by individual companies. So individual companies have been advocating for this exact same model, and somehow this model looks identical to what they've been advocating for over the last 2 or 3 years. So I have to imagine that I believe that probably at least 1 or 2 of the stakeholders that were present in this process had the opportunity, or at least had more of the ear of the minister than I believe that RMA and probably AUMA did. And that's regrettable to me, that I don't believe that our folks were actually heard. And I think, as I said, one of the participants said this was preordained, and this didn't change too much from the input of RMA and AUMA as it went through the process. The other comment that I'll have to say is, and I can't speak on behalf of AUMA, but definitely they've been very positive, very supportive in this process too as well. They are a partner. They recognize the impact that this would have to them. Quite honestly, you could probably throw out, if you went to scenario D, you can throw out every single collaborative framework agreement in the province. You might as well burn them up, because everything's changed. The assessment would change so much for most of the municipalities that those agreements would be null and void, because the financial situation of most municipalities would change so significantly that those agreements wouldn't be worth the paper they're written on. I do think, personally, I think scenario D is a poison pill. So again, when my daughter was young, I'd pick the 3 dresses she could choose from, but she had to leave the house in a dress. And so I'd pick an ugly dress and 2 pretty ones, and she'd always pick the ugly dress, but that's what my daughter was like. But the fact is that we're being asked to choose. So scenario D, I do believe, is a poison pill. And I do think that those other scenarios are likely where this ministry might push more towards. But as I said, and I'll come back to my first statement, we're picking amongst a bunch of terrible choices. So picking amongst a bunch of terrible choices is probably not correct. The other comment too is that I was meeting with Nate Horner, who's he's the rural caucus rep, and 5 of the counties that represent him. So Starland County, Stettler County, MD of Provost, and I got to think of the other ones that were there. But anyways, their comments were that this isn't pick the best scenario. They want this to be thrown out completely, and that was voiced quite openly by that group too as well. So the fact is that there's 2 questions here. Why are we doing this now? Given that we're in a COVID situation, we have a stressed economy, a stressed agricultural industry. At the same time, this isn't the right time to do this. We need to push this off. And I'll make a comment on timing too as well. The comment from the minister has been, this hasn't been looked at since 2005. There has been numerous attempts at doing this. There's at least 3 that had been shelved by the ministry. Every single one of those previous assessment model reviews resulted in higher taxes by the oil and gas industry, and the government of Alberta refused to actually put those out because of that situation. This is the first of the 3, so this would be the 4th, and this 4th one happens to show a significant decrease in taxes for the large oil and gas companies. So again, there's 3 other times they've been doing this. So this isn't that, I'm glad we're doing this now, this hasn't been done. This has been done 3 times and been shelved by the government because it would cause what was perceived undue harm to the oil and gas industry. I think from the go forward perspective, I think that the best we can do is, first of all, again, this is so complex. We need to find a way to instruct our residents on why this would cause harm to municipalities. I also have to say that my personal comments on this topic is that the depreciation models being pushed by industry they're exactly orchestrated to favor the 4 large companies. And the reason why I say that is I have 10-year-old wells on my farm that are very active. I happen to ride my horse by them, I check meters. they're pretty rocking good wells, and they have been so for 10 years. If you look at the depreciation models that are being pushed out right now, those would be 0.1 assets to Ponoka County, but they're still making a lot of money. And when you ride by them, or when I walk by them, they're not covered with binder twine and duct tape. These are functioning mechanical facilities that are not fully depreciated out, that are still producing money, that I still have vehicles and service rigs driving on county infrastructure to attend to them. These are not just pieces of crap lying out in the field not making any money. So depreciating those out by the models that are being pushed out there, that is actually false economy. And I have an MBA in finance, and there's a concept called smokestack chasing. So one of the arguments about doing this is the competitiveness of Alberta. And there's been some talk about Alberta is not competitive. So I think this is a form of smokestack chasing to try to attract investment. The fact is that there is no empirical evidence of any attempts at using taxation as a driver for economic business. And this type of business there's been no success anywhere on the planet for smokestack chasing. What it actually does is actually creates a false economy, and it's actually failed everywhere. So if you have tax breaks on business parks, those kind of things, they typically fail after 10 years, and they typically are not that successful. And this is really a form of smokestack chasing where you try to create a favorable tax environment, or a perceived favorable tax environment to attract capital, and it actually doesn't work. And I guess the final point to make from RMA standpoint is definitely, and I'll use this phrase where I think a lot of other people are at right now. When I'm mad at my kids, I can scream and yell and they kind of just cloud out. But when I tell them I'm disappointed, my kids pay attention. And truth be told, I'm disappointed in this. This is rural Alberta. We believe a handshake's a deal. We work together, collaborate with this government, and rural Alberta is collaborated for oil and gas, and we actually are partners in oil and gas. I do believe that this is an agenda by one small group, CAP specifically. I don't believe this is the oil and gas industry. They don't speak on behalf of the oil and gas industry. I believe that this is being driven by CAP and advocated by one small lobby group. And I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed in this process. I'm disappointed that one voice or two voices at that table have dominated these scenarios that have been placed out there. And I'm disappointed that I believe that the concerns raised by RMA and AUMA have been ignored through this process. And this really has become a list of scenarios that are quite favorable to at least one of the stakeholders at that group. And the infamous Canadian Taxpayer Landowners Group, whoever, Canadian Property Taxpayer Association, I'd sure like to know who those people are, because I have no idea who they are. So yeah, maybe and I guess I am having an emergency meeting with RMA at 9 o'clock here. So as far as the RMA go forward, two of the strategic things that we're asking municipal leaders like yourself to do is obviously lobby to your local MLAs. More importantly too is I think to educate your citizens, but I do think your business sector, I think, would be quite interested in learning more about this. The embargo has been lifted. I've been sharing this package with just about everybody I can imagine. And I think that it's important for everybody to understand how this affects all of us. You folks are the sad winners of one of the more impacted municipalities, if you actually look at proportionally. You're quite a bit more than quite a few of the other counties too as well. And it's going to cause quite a bit of harm. All these scenarios cause quite a bit of harm to Clearwater County. And so I think that you need to ensure that your business sector understands. And at the same time, I think a partner in this are some of your young, small oil and gas companies, because those are the ones that are going to have increase in taxes. Those are the ones that are actually going to have changes in their mill rate. The other comment that's been made by the minister, and I need to bring to your attention too, because it's quite recent, is his comments have been that you cannot use taxes to backfill or you replace any decreases in any other sort of funding. So you can't increase taxes. All these scenarios cause a decrease in assessment for education as well. So the government has to increase their education tax somewhere. And I do believe that will fall back on residences, because there's also an education portion of all these properties that we're talking about, or some of the properties, especially the M&E part. So the fact is that there's going to be an increase in residential taxes regardless of what municipalities do, because that education portion is going to be lost as well. When you look at $1.6 billion of assessment loss in scenario D for Clearwater County, that education tax has to come from somewhere. So where's that going to come from? So I think that, I guess my final point is that hopefully we've armed you folks with enough information to at least discuss this topic. It's regrettable that you only have a 1 year snapshot. As I said, if you try to model this out, and I'm speculatively modeling it out, but I can just guess because I know how some of this stuff works. I think these scenarios are a lot worse than they look, especially to Clearwater County. Some of us, central Alberta, we've got some old legacy sites and we've got an older gas fields. We're going to actually be harmed quite significantly, and I'm expecting my county, Pinoca County, will be harmed quite significantly after about year 5. We've got a lot of old legacy sites, those kind of situations. And I do have to say too as well, I think that the important piece of this is the MLAs. The MLAs have only found out about this whole topic. They found out about it, I think, on July 29th. I think that they actually had the information presented to them, and I might be wrong, 1 or 2 days. Since that time, CAP has had the ear of caucus on this topic. Regretfully, RMA was able to meet with caucus prior to this, and because of embargo was not able to talk about this topic to caucus. So 3 of our advocacy pieces is we need to get in front of the minister, we need to get in front of caucus and present our position, and at the same time the general public needs to understand what exactly this would mean to them. And I think the urbans would feel it just as much, and they're starting to put the math together too, as that our hard work on trying to build relationships and trying to provide infrastructure and services to oil and gas, to our local AUMA neighbors, they're going to be harmed as well. And I think that our goal would be to be in front of the minister and not to pick a scenario amongst these poor choices, but to start over again, have all the data available in the process, not just cherry-pick data for 1 year, but to actually model this out. And at the same time, there's other assessment portions that need to be looked at, because the problem with this is that you're just picking one piece. There's also other assessment categories that need to be updated as well. And doing one at a time or doing one this way creates a disproportionate burden, not just on municipalities, but actually preordains what the other assessment models. So you can imagine forestry, every other industry is going to be lining up, trying to get the exact same model that this comes out with. And we need to look at this as a system, not a category. Taxation is a system. It's not a category. It's not just one asset over another. You need to look at it from one asset supplementing another. How much does that asset have an impact on the land, on infrastructure, etc.? The other critical thing is that we've been compared to other provinces, both BC and Saskatchewan, and I've driven through the beautiful, beautiful roads of Clearwater County. You folks provide tremendous infrastructure on behalf of oil and gas. You've had a tremendous amount of straight flow through of your taxation to provide the services for oil and gas and to allow that industry to be successful in Clearwater County. In those other provinces, they do not have that type of infrastructure. Backroad Saskatchewan does not have the same road infrastructure to oil and gas as they do in Alberta. And I love Saskatchewan and I love the people of Saskatchewan. I don't love Saskatchewan roads. But the fact is that we've had that flow through. So we haven't been building large blue hoops and we haven't been buying art and we don't have mega buildings. We provide quality infrastructure to our oil and gas industry. And I think that we will continue to do so as best we can. And the fact is that these tax dollars haven't been supplementing residents. They've been providing direct line the infrastructure required for the resource development in this province. And that's how all of us have functioned. And the other comment I've made to every minister that I'll say is that if every single rural municipal councillor that I know, you folks represent your people and you're a conservative, tight-fisted, cheap bunch of buggers, that you don't spend money willy-nilly, and us being treated that we're tax grabbing and overspending and underspending and all these other comments, that's not who we are. We're duct tape and binder twine. We do the best we can and we're not gouging, and we know oil and gas. These are partners in our communities. These are people that our community that we voted us in. My neighbors are all in the oil and gas industry and they farm as a hobby and vice versa. And these people, that's who I represent. So I understand oil and gas as all you folks do. And we're not anti-oil and gas. but I definitely don't believe that my residents should cover off those big four and help them make a lot more money. And just one comment on one of them, even in these tough times, CNRL, which shows up to be one of the top four, had a dividend increase this year, so.
Paul, thank you so much for this information. Now, you have to leave at what time, Paul?
9 o'clock, but I can be a little late for that.
Okay, so I'd like to just ask the councillors, do you have any questions for Paul? Any comments you wish to make on his presentation?
I have a question.
Councillor Lang.
Good morning, Paul. Are you able to share who the top 4 companies are?
I can actually, just give me a minute. Ask me another question, I'll search while I'm doing it. I don't want to get it wrong.
Deputy Reeve Swanson.
Thanks for your honesty, Paul. I appreciate it. I know RMA did a quick evaluation of each county and the impacts of each county in our province. And I know that, yes, we are, as Clearwater County, we are going to be hit severely. Can you give me an idea about where we land in that list?
I think, and you know what, did you folks get everybody else's assessment? I think you asked me that too, Michelle. Did you get that at all?
As far as I know, we just received Clearwater counties. We've not received
Okay.
information for any other municipality.
And my apologies, so I'll send you an assessment from all the other counties too, because I think it's very important to you. I don't know if you want to know if you're in the top 10, but you are, so. It's quite significant. You guys are, I think you're probably might be proportionally one of the higher ones in Central District too as well. I think you're in the top 5. I'll get a spreadsheet and I'll share that with you too as well. And I'll get our staff as well to send to your administration and yourselves a list of all the other ones. It's fascinating reading just to see how it's impacted all the other ones too as well.
Thank you.
So the big 4, sorry, are Suncor, Cenovus, CNRL, and Imperial Oil. Husky's in there too as well, so. One of the other comments too I'll make, and I know it's cheeky of me, but sometimes I can't help myself. These companies are corporations. They are businesses. They have shareholders. They're not people. They're not communities. And I don't blame a single one of them for asking for a tax break. I don't blame a single one of them for taking their money and flowing it straight through to shareholders, because that's how they work, because they are businesses. Municipalities are communities. We are not to be run as businesses. We don't have shareholders, we have citizens. It's a way different conversation. And right now, if you give a tax break to Husky, for example, or one of these other companies, I don't blame any of them for providing share buybacks and flowing money to their shareholders, because that's what they have to do as corporate entities. But you need to keep that in mind when you give tax breaks. You need to keep that in mind when you start making changes to assessment, because that money may not be reinvested in Alberta, just to be clear. And that's what people are talking about. That money might just flow right out of Alberta. And that's just a reality of business.
Thank you. Other questions from council? Councillor Duncan?
Morning, Paul. Jim Duncan here. Is there an RMA contact or somewhere else that we could maybe turn to for some more of the technical advice or technical interpretation of some of this? Just, we'll talk to our own assessment people, but just to try and understand how the different scenarios work versus what the current situation is.
You bet. Yeah, Wyatt Scovern is sort of running as the technical lead for us, and then we've actually gone out to a couple third parties to help, as well as the CEO of the MD of Provost, for example. He was on the assessment team, and he used to be an assessor. He's a CEO now, but he was assessor for years too as well. But definitely, I'll put those folks in touch with you too, and I'll get Wyatt to actually send you that information request you had on all the other interpretations of the other municipalities as well, and then he can be your sort of conduit to answer those technical questions. So I'll definitely provide that for you, Jim.
Thank you.
Deputy Reeve Swanson.
You've stressed the importance, Paul, in regards to the consultation is like 30 days. But really, you have heard that the hard decision is coming at the end of the month, correct? with that, and that we have a very small window to talk to our MLAs and in that lobby process. Could you give a little bit more of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so just to be clear, this, because of where this is housed within government, this is actually a decision of cabinet. And so this isn't a decision of caucus even, this is a decision of cabinet. So it's all those ministers are actually the ones that vote on this and provide the Minister of Municipal Affairs, whatever scenario or decision that they have. So by the end of the month, it's expected that there will be a meeting of caucus sometime at the end of August, early September. There will be a meeting of cabinet sometime in early September. And at that cabinet, they will call the question on what scenario or what the go forward on this is. Now, as you can imagine, getting a hold of a cabinet minister is quite complex. Sometimes finding an MLA or a caucus member has been difficult just because of the time of year. There's a few going on holidays. And so, yeah, it's an extremely tight timeline. And knowing this government has gone really hard up until a week and a half ago. So you imagine the last thing they want to do is start talking to us about assessment right now. They probably want to spend some time with their families. So I can't blame them for running away and hiding and going dark. And I think even our MLA might be gone for a couple weeks here quite shortly to spend some time with family, and well earned too, and I respect that. But given that scenario, take 2 weeks out of those 30 days, because you're not going to find some of these ministers and some of these MLAs, because they definitely deserve the 2 weeks they deserve in the next 30 days. So you only really have 2 weeks within those 30 days to actually talk to MLAs.
Thanks.
So Paul, just to go over the four scenarios that Clearwater County is facing. Scenario A will cause a loss of about $2.5 million in our total revenues. Scenario B will cause a loss of almost $4 million. Scenario C will cause a loss of about 12 million. I'm doing math in my head here, 11.5. Sorry, 10.5. And scenario D will cause us to lose almost $13.5 million. And that would be starting in 2021. And that's only the first year, and then we have further depreciation on that assessment, so the decrease would increase in 2022. And Municipal Affairs has not provided us with the data for the second, third, fourth, or fifth year. We're having to base this just on what we see in the first year.
That's correct.
That's very shocking. So it's a 22% loss of our total revenue. And based on the information that RMA has given us, to balance that out, we would have to do a residential mill rate increase at 257% to have a balanced book, or we cut a tremendous amount of services to keep the books balanced. That's
Yeah.
correct?
That's correct. And given that, so if you look at any of those scenarios, the other piece of the math is that is not even possible. There is no possibility of us increasing taxes by 257%.
Especially when the Minister of Municipal Affairs is saying we're not allowed to raise taxes to cover shortfalls.
That's correct.
Well, that puts municipalities in a bit of a tough spot.
Yeah, it becomes a question of viability and solvency when you start looking at really, truth be told, any of these scenarios. So just to be clear, scenario A isn't good either. Because scenario A, basically with the straight line depreciation models being proposed, and even under that depreciation model, you're exactly right, Reeve, this gets worse. And by year 5, it starts to look a lot like scenario D, because you depreciate it out, you've created zero-based assets or approaching zero. There's a floor to it, but a 0.1 assessment or asset, it's irrelevant, right? You get down to everything's worth 10% of what it was before. That starts to change all your models, right?
So AUMA is supportive of RMA's current stance on this. As you know, we are currently negotiating with the town of Rocky Mount House on a new waste agreement. We renegotiated a fire agreement. I guess my concern is if we get hit with a massive revenue hit like this, we might have to reopen some of these agreements. We might have to reopen our ICF, and it'll take us back to step zero after we spent 2.5 years working on these proposals and on these agreements. I'm extremely, well, I'll use your word, I'm extremely disappointed with the position that Municipal Affairs has put, not just this municipality, but every rural municipality in the province. Councillor Lang.
Yeah, just a little bit of an addition in talking about these agreements. Like, we're currently working on a waste agreement with our partner, and I'm just wondering, is there any sense in moving ahead with these negotiations? Paul, what's your thoughts? What's happening in your municipality?
Well, we're in a situation where I wouldn't get used to MSI right now either. So I have more uncertainty than I've ever had. So how do you create a long-term agreement? If it's all buttercups and cookies and you're just writing a protocol agreement, agree to work together, that's fine. I'm not sure how I even can fiscally plan right now based on the potential risks to MSI. The fact is that this emergency funding that's out there has actually artificially inflated our economy right now. So once those CERB comes out of the market, once the reckoning comes, there's a significant decrease. And you will see in the next 2 weeks, Minister Taves, who's the finance minister, is going to come out with a revenue discussion, I think, in the beginning of September. I expect that the revenue from this province is dire. And I expect that what they've done is the royalty model has been frozen for 10 years at one of the lowest in North America right now. So any revenue from oil and gas is going to be at the lowest it's ever been, probably since 2009. It might be lower than that based on some of the models I've seen. So I probably wouldn't talk about money with anybody right now, to be quite honest. And I don't want to be, Chicken Little or anything, but I got to be honest with you. How do you have a financial discussion on a long-term agreement, not knowing what the long-term looks like? I'm not quite sure. If it's an essential service, I would see waste as an essential service. I got to be honest. I'm all for recycling. I'm not sure if recycling is an essential service right now. We're going down to, when you start looking at any of these models after year 5, I'm not even sure if I can keep the lights on.
Councillor Vandermeer, did you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Paul. John Vandermeer here. Yeah, I certainly tune to comment about none of the scenarios are. That's where I'm at. It looks like they've laid out a range. Scenario D is very dire. So clearly, strategically, they may well come off of that and say, well, we'll give you B or something like that, ultimately. But none of these are acceptable in a situation where you've got very low assessments on these old assets. We need to maintain taxes near where they are. The dollars need to stay the same to, as you pointed out, continue the services that are available in these communities. These are not shareholders of corporations at a distance, our communities. And for the Minister of Municipal Affairs to say you cannot raise taxes to fill in the deficiencies that he has just created is ridiculous. The ability to keep our revenues about the same is important. And you pointed out about the provincial situation. Same thing there. We have a low royalty rate worldwide or in North America, and the revenues are down on a royalty basis. But the province is going to have to address that too. And as you've also pointed out, these wells in our area, as you pointed out, your neighboring wells, these are all viable wells. Further out in the shallower gas and the go-bed methane gas wells, none of those are not viable. But where we are, we have long-term wells that have a very slow decline rate, and they're viable. So there may be the odd company go bankrupt, but these wells will continue to produce, and we need to continue to maintain the roads and the networks and the systems in our area to serve this industry and our population. So I agree with your comment that none of these scenarios are acceptable. They will play some kind of a game of saying, well, we're not going to hit you as hard as the worst case, so you should feel good. I don't feel good about any of them.
Paul, do you wish to comment on any of that? Oh, you're muted, Paul.
And I can't repeat it. I said some of my best stuff while I was muted. And I agree 100%. You know, one of the comments that was made by Cap, and I hate to sound like I'm vilifying Cap, but I am vilifying Cap right now just because of this is truly their advocacy piece. One of their comments is they don't want to have a situation like they had with Trident. So you saw their bankruptcy, and they said, "Oh, we don't want to have another Trident." Trident and the bankruptcy of any of these companies. Their number 8 cost for a majority of these companies is taxes. Taxes is not a driver for bankruptcy of oil and gas companies. It is commodity prices, it is cost of service, it is past historic record and financial record, and access to capital. Taxes is not the cause of the bankruptcy of any of the companies that have gone bankrupt in the last 10 years. If you can't pay your taxes, that is the last thing that these guys have been paying. So I think that it's been positioned that some of these companies are going bankrupt because of that. The other comment too, exactly, Councillor, that you mentioned is the age of these facilities. So basically they're treating within these models, they're treating these facilities that they get 25% depreciation year 1. And then the depreciation model goes out to year 5. These assets last 40 to 60 years, especially the shallow CBM stuff is a 40 to 50 year asset. And that is gold to a corporate statement when you start having zero assessment assets that are still making money year 40, but they've been assessed at 0 after year 25. Woohoo! Like that's an accountant's dream. You have cash flow and zero asset cost. It doesn't look better than that. So yeah, I think we all, and us central region, we've got the same problem. We've got the same sort of older fields too as well, and we have the same risks as well. So I think we're all in this together, and that's the most important thing. I think all of us are affected differently, but we're all definitely affected. And whatever happens to Clearwater County happens to Pinoca County too as well. So we're all partners in this as we move forward too as well.
My light was just...
Okay. Any further questions? It's 9 o'clock. We should let Paul get on to his next meeting. So last call for questions. Paul, I want to thank you for your time. More than that, thank you for all the hard work that you and RMA have been doing to defend our residents and protect their pocketbooks in this, and just keep up the good fight. And we'll be in touch and in getting more information about this Tuesday meeting.
Great. Thanks for having me, and appreciate us doing what we can on Tuesday next week. Let's hopefully just do a do-over for sure.
Yep. Thank you.
Hey, thanks folks. Have an awesome day.
Council, I think we'll have a 5-minute break, and we'll be back at, let's go 10 after 9. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. So any comments or discussion from council based on the presentation? Councillor Laird.
Yes, well, I guess what came to me through all of this is it's clear that rural municipalities are being penalized for being good stewards of the public purse and for providing community services. And I would say that our urban municipality neighbors are also unfortunately being undoubtedly penalized along with us due to our historical shared services. And I see that as being a challenge with the ICFs. I see that becoming something that'll end up being reopened and further eroding any kind of current relationships that we have between rurals and urbans. This is absolutely diabolical timing, as far as I can tell. So I think it's going to be important that we lobby for, I'll say, a redo. Start over. This isn't going to work for any municipalities. And I think it's important that our municipalities, all rural and urban, get the message to the provincial government and to the Minister of Municipal Affairs, who seems to be disconnected from this, that they need to take more time and look at it holistically. You cannot take one piece of taxation without looking at the rest, because this all seems like thin edge of the wedge and just a grab. And I think it's going to have long-lasting, impactful impacts to our communities all across Alberta, and it will impact the provincial government as well. And it won't help the smaller oil and gas companies. I don't see this as being something positive.
Councillor Lang. Councillor Vandenberg, will have you go next after Councillor Lang.
Yeah,
Thank
mine is just kind of more of a question. Paul made a couple comments that he kind of felt this was agendas being driven by one group, CAP. And just, we've heard that the smaller oil and gas companies will suffer greatly. So my question is CAP not made up of members of the smaller companies as well? I'm not sure if anyone here can answer that. So is it just the larger companies? Like, how can CAP drive this? I thought it would be made up of members of small, medium, and large oil and gas companies.
I can answer that. CAP is certainly made up of a wide range and many small companies, but certainly the ones with the biggest financial clout lately are those big companies. I'm not sure how they're able to drive it, but they seem to be, and it could be because they present a model where the smaller companies aren't losing anything, whereas the big companies are gaining a lot. I don't know that, there's no data. There's no data to really check any of these things. So it's a black box. Nobody's sharing information, so we don't know.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Duncan. Councillor Vandermeer, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. I do. One of the comments that Paul made was the prior attempts to change this model, and it was during times of higher oil and gas prices generally, I believe, and CAP or its predecessor were successful in stalling any moves that would have increased their tax burden. They're very effective at lobbying, and they stall it. What needs to be done is the municipalities do need, as previous comments have been made here, municipalities do need to get together and stall this thing in a time of significant change in our economy. You don't want to make drastic changes, certainly to the income of municipalities. And as is pointed out by Paul, these changes are not going to bring investment into our community. Even the change, certainly the change that to lower the corporate tax, provincial corporate tax from 11% down to 8% means nothing in this scenario. It just takes a little more revenue out of the provincial coffers, and I don't know where they're going to make that up. So, you know, their premise is based in folly, it seems, and the industry CAP organization has been very successful in pushing this concept forward and installing other revisions from the past. Municipalities do need to band together, and I think that's the only way to address this. And this revision needs to be put off. None of these scenarios are acceptable. There's no, and for the minister to say you can't raise taxes on these assets to compensate for the lower assessment, that the whole model is nuts, that you can write these things off so quickly and not be paying taxes on an asset that lasts for 40 plus years in many cases. So it's complete folly, and unfortunately our association has not been able to even be at the table. It's you know, this is treasonous almost to local municipalities and communities. You know, how can the province say they're acting in our interests out here? Anyway, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan.
I have more of a technical question. I don't know if administration can help me answer this. Tracy, could we go back to the part of the beginning of this report where it talks about the current taxation, how it's done, and where the 4 scenarios are? Sorry, I don't have the page number for you, but yeah, I think you're just up there. Basically, the question would be, I'm not sure I understand how assets are depreciated right now during a taxation. I don't know if, Rob, if you have any way to sort of give us the Counselor for Dummies version of that or not. Because it talks about a 0.67% there.
Yeah, I'm not a technical expert when it comes to the valuation of oil and gas assets, but based on this submission.
There's current, yes.
It looks like it's
Right there,
affecting linear and dip property. And basically, the previous there have been discussions over the years to update the CCRG, which is the basis on which a lot of these wells and pipelines are valued. And my understanding is there's an A times B times C times D methodology that is currently being used. And it's the depreciation factor, I believe it's A factor, which applies, the current it shows at a 67% asset value applied. And basically the oil and gas industry has been asking for more depreciation to be applied in an earlier scenario. And the discussions have been going on for quite a while. And I'm not aware that there was going to be an immediate or a decision made this year that will affect the 2020 assessment. I know that for the 2019 assessment, oil and gas companies have filed numerous appeals through the courts, so there is going to be decisions rendered, or there is currently being court dates set for oil and gas to put their request for additional depreciation before the courts. So that might be driving the current status that the government's going to be looking at making a decision to kind of help the oil and gas industry at the same time make these appeals go away. But one way or the other, the oil and gas industry is putting it forward that, they want to have their assets valued or looked at in a different way that's going to be advantageous to them, which will drop their assessment value, which will in turn drop the taxes. So that's a low-level view of it. Like I say, I don't have the expertise. I am scheduled to do a WebEx at 10 a.m. this morning with multiple rural assessors. So we're going to have our own internal discussion, and I'm trying to glean as much information as I can from that meeting. And we do have a face-to-face meeting scheduled with Murray and I on Tuesday with our contract assessor from Accurate Assessment Group and the head of that company, Ray Fortin. He's been on these committees that have been in discussions with the government, with oil and gas representatives. The scenario is like to increase the depreciation schedule for the oil and gas. So I'm expecting to get further information and more inside information, if you per se, what he can share. Like Paul mentioned, that there is a degree of confidentiality when these meetings take place amongst all these players, because obviously they don't want details being leaked out. But I know Ray, in general terms, can provide additional information, and after that meeting, I'll certainly be more informed to give you, the best information, most current information available, is what I can tell you.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's important that we keep getting as much information as we can, because it's, like I said before, we need to find a solution to this, but we are, I think, in agreement, we need to say no to these 4 scenarios, but unless we can provide some kind of another scenario that we would, an alternative to move forward on this, it would be in our best interest to find that as well. And we have to even understand the status quo as well as these scenarios. Thank you.
I think one of the first best steps would be to actually have RMA at the table instead of just having the oil industry at that decision-making table. It sounds like municipalities were excluded, even though we will be the ones, all municipalities will be the people affected by it. I think that is a terrible move. Councillor Laird.
Councillor Vandermeer actually used a word that I thought, and it resonated with me to some degree, that this could almost be considered treasonous. Given that there was no government representatives that we can tell, according to what this study or this report says, at the technical committee, I almost wonder if that's a level of incompetence. And maybe there's an opportunity to ask the government and I would say the Premier, if he needs to review the suitability of the current Minister of Municipal Affairs. Because there seems to be a disconnect with our rural municipalities, without a doubt, and the impact it has on our urbans. If that isn't incompetence, I don't know what is.
Deputy Reeve Swanson.
This is just, I guess, for clarification in regards to this, these scenarios. This will only impact the wells and pipelines or linear assessment. This does not deal with gas plants, those particular big facilities. So the counties, I'm going to just pick on County Lacombe, for example, who have the Joffre plant. This will not impact their assessment of that particular asset that they have within their boundaries. So yes, we have a few in ours, but maybe for more clarification, just which particular assets that these scenarios are impacting. If I could get more clarification from Mr. Hagan.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve. You're correct that right now they're looking at the M&E, the pipelines, and so forth, the linear. I would also summarize to answer you with one word: yet. It'll come. This will be the thin edge of the wedge, to quote another council member. This will be the start, and it will go beyond oil and gas, and other industries will be coming to the table and looking for breaks as well. The economy in its current state is affecting everybody. everybody is looking for some sort of advantage to move ahead. So this will be the start. So that concerns us.
Yes.
So the scenarios that were presented, I guess, how comfortable are we in the information that we've been given by RMA? Or are we just going to say from the broad sense of the thing, of these scenarios, that these are the level, the information or the data they have gleaned on, but there could be, because Paul has mentioned, right, that he has no idea where the data has come from. It's being held by the province. So what's the data they've been using for this modeling? Can we say that, and Councillor Vandermeer referred to it, that, they may not go scenario D, but they'll give us something in between. So we know it's coming, we know the shoe's gonna drop, so maybe we need to help our residents and our businesses understand that there is going to be something coming down the road and help them this not be a surprise. I guess this is coming, so maybe Mr. Hagan can glean more information on that.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve. My advice to council would be that I think communication to the public is essential and important. I would recommend that council focus on the principles involved as opposed to the detailed numbers. I understand that RMA had limited information to start with from the group that was looking at this and from the government. From there, they had to make certain assumptions in coming up with their estimates and their projections. We're not aware of what those assumptions were. So I'm hesitant to put out the numbers that have been shared with us. But I think the principles involved are very valid, and I would suggest that we look back to the recent letter that council sent to MLA Nixon and the principles and potential effects that were highlighted there. I think that is good information for the public to receive.
So my understanding was that the provincial government gave numbers to RMA. RMA then took those numbers and interpreted for each municipality as best they could with their, not knowing everything, they did the best interpretation they could and sent that out to every municipality or every rural municipality.
That's my understanding as well.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Laird.
Well, given that we are probably in a position where we have to give them, the government and our other partners in this situation, some other idea of what we could do, perhaps there's an opportunity to consider all of our municipalities looking at a percentage of reimbursement. It doesn't affect the taxes, and it then allows that then to become something that is paid back to help offset those costs locally, and those dollars then would likely help all across the board. So we could look at a percentage of reimbursement to our taxes, and that would at least be something locally that could be done. And it would then allow all sectors of taxation to have a fair play.
Councillor Duncan.
Thank you for bringing up a suggestion. I guess we need some more discussion on that, but that's probably something that's fairly difficult to roll out over the province because we're all at different levels of taxation on our linear and machinery equipment and different ratios, with respect to the 5-to-1. So for one municipality to do reimbursements, how do you make that sort of equal across the province? Because then it becomes a bit of a probably playoff between industry and trying to get the best deal from a different county or something to that effect. I can see the merit in trying to find a way to reimburse, but it would have to be done at a provincial level, I think. I don't think you would want to start playing county against county to try and attract investment or something else based on a rebate to their, being better in Clearwater County versus Ponoka County or somewhere else. Careful consideration is required.
So the deadline for the consultation is August 30th, was that the deadline? When was the caucus meeting that Paul mentioned? Did we have a date or just the end of the month? So time is very short. I believe we need to get information out to our residents so they know what might be coming down the pipes. When we had the proposed Bighorn Park, the NDP had consultation, we talked with our residents, we heard our residents. All of a sudden here we've got 20-some days to communicate, we don't have time for the public meetings. How should we best get that information out to our residents? Mr. Hagan.
Thank you, Reeve. The county's communications coordinator, Michael, has drafted a press release that would provide this information to the public, so we can circulate that to council today for review and comment. And I would suggest that that would be an effective first step to get this information out there.
Thank you. Deputy Reeve Swanson.
I think that's awesome. I would also like to have an opportunity where we have a bit of Q&A so that residents that are sending in their questions have an opportunity to have those answered. So whether it's be frequently asked questions in that regard. They don't have to necessarily be named, right? They can remain anonymous, but just say, okay, here's some of the questions that we've been getting asked, and here's the details of what we can share. So also with that, if we could have that as well.
Councillor Lougheed.
I guess a comment I might have is I was actually shocked to hear that our MLAs only became aware of the contents of this review on July the 29th. So I'm sure they're grappling with the consequences of this, and I'm sure that they would like to hear from their constituents their feelings as well. So I think it'd be nice to include contacts within the Alberta government and our MLAs for our citizens to give their feedback to that group of people as well, because I'm sure they're grappling with the consequences and the decision-making process that many of them will be involved with over the next month.
Councillor Vandermeer, any comments?
No further comments at this time. I mean, we need to get the information out there, and I just wished or would hope that we can have a sit down with our MLA Nixon, because that is important. We need to do that, and there's no date on that, I understand, yet.
To the best of my knowledge, Minister Nixon will be meeting with local Reeves next week, but there is no day for him to meet with this council again. Is that correct? So no date for him to meet with this council again.
Well, at least Reeve will have some opportunity for a good dialogue then next week. So we look forward to hearing back on how that goes. But yeah, that could be pivotal, and the indications coming out of that will be very important.
So administration is working on a press release with information. Do we need any further steps? Time is of the essence. We've got 20-some days. Many of our residents are not on Facebook. They do not, there are limited ways to reach many of our residents in such a short time span. Deputy Reeve Swanson.
This is just, should we hear beginning of September or the end of August in regards to what the decision coming down the road as far as the scenario. This is just a request to administration to bring us then an update of the financial impacts that we'll have directly at that particular point in time. And because that with budget coming up in December, we know that the impact, we will have to be making adjustments for the next coming years. So sorry to detract.
If I could just respond to that. Yes, Deputy Reeve, we would definitely bring back any information that we receive with interpretation as well for council's information and understanding. And as well, I would remind council that we do have a strategic planning meeting coming up September 21st. And if information is available, that will be a key component to the agenda on that meeting as well.
Rob, a comment? Your light's on. Okay. Councillor Lang?
Just a comment regarding the press release. You're exactly right. Reeve, not everyone's on Facebook or can even get the internet. I'm just going to make a suggestion that it goes in our local paper, and I'm going to suggest the Western Star because it goes to every household in Clearwater County, and it's free. Everyone gets it. They have no choice, and it comes out every week. So it's a quick way to get this news out to our residents because our residents will have the loudest voice in this, and this is their voice can go back to their MLA.
So are you making a motion that we buy ad space in these local newspapers?
I guess I could. I don't know what the cost would be, but I think it'd be well worth it. Our residents do need this news and they need it quickly. So I'll make that motion that we buy ad space to put it in the Western Star. I'm not sure about the Mountaineer. I know it's very limited, the distribution. I don't like to favor one newspaper over the other. They're both good papers. I'm going to just defer this motion for a minute and listen. I think Councillor Liard wants to make a comment, and then I'll maybe alter this motion.
Councillor Laird.
Yes, given that this is going to have a significant impact on our urban neighbors, I think it's going to be important that we send it to all papers. And that may include the Sundry Roundup as well. The other part that we may also want to think about is having the Reeve and perhaps key staff create a video as well and try to get that out. But I would say all papers because it's going to have an impact on our urban neighbors.
Councillor Lang.
Okay, so with Councillor Yard's feedback, I'll make the motion that this press release goes to all papers. Well, the Mountaineer and the Western Star. I'm not sure about, not the Sundry. I don't think the Sundry Roundup goes to our area, does it?
I don't think it goes all the way south to James River. So to reach those residents in the south, I believe we need to do the Sundry paper as well.
Okay, and the Sundry paper. And I'm not I guess you have the press release may be already made, but I think we need to make sure that the urbans know this will impact them as well. Especially with the Mountaineer, the urbans have to know that this is going to greatly impact them in the press release. So anyways, back to my motion. So my motion is to take out ad space in Mountaineer, the Western Star, and the Sundry Roundup for this press release.
Is it just the press release you want printed up, or are you wanting administration to tweak it a bit and make it more, what's the right word, accessible? Because press releases are written for a certain audience, and I think the ad that we're looking at would be more, we want something more accessible to everyone where they don't need to read, 5 or 6 paragraphs to get the main point. And we can direct them back to the website for further information. Councillor Lang?
Are you wanting to amend my motion, Reeve?
I'm the Reeve, I can't amend a motion.
Just anyone? Sure, I'll amend the motion that administration tweak it as they see fit to reach as great an audience as possible.
Mr. Hagan.
Thank you. What I would suggest on behalf of administration is our intent would be to base the newspaper ads on the press release to ensure consistency with the information. Formatting might look a little different, and as well in terms of how we present the information, but there will be consistency there. So we'll start with the press release, share it with council, and then from there, we'll develop that into not only the press release, but also the newspaper ads.
I know the press release is being developed right now, so it's not completed. Will there be information on how residents can contact the decision makers on this, the Premier, Minister Nixon, and Minister Madu?
I think that's a good suggestion.
Councillor Lahi, did you have a?
No, actually.
Okay. Do we need the motion read back? Okay, any further discussion on the motion? All in favor? Councillor Vandermeer?
In favor.
Motion carries 7-0. Because this will affect all the municipalities in this region, the town of Rocky Mountain House, Clearwater County, and the village of Caroline, does council have a desire for a joint letter between the three of us, the three municipalities, asking for a do-over of this process? Okay. Are you making a motion, Councillor Duncan? Or Councillor Laird?
I would suggest you include the summer village of Burnt Stick as well.
Yes.
I would make that motion.
Okay. Well, so admin will write the letter.
Asking the government to pause on this and allow for further examination, and that the four scenarios presented are not acceptable to these municipalities in the signed letter.
Any questions, administration? Further discussion on the motion? All in favor? Councillor Vandermeer?
In favor.
Motion carries 7-0.
Sorry, just one other comment. I'm wondering, I'm not sure how it's going to unfold next week with your meeting with MLA Nixon, but potentially could the mayors also be included in that meeting?
That, we can see, that is kind of morphing into be an RMA function. So I do not know if urban municipalities would be invited, but Tracy and I can contact RMA and we'll be getting more information in the process today. It's still in the early stages of planning for a meeting that's going to take place in a few short days.
Okay. I guess my only comment then would be that we maybe let our neighbors know that will be attending this, even if they
Yes.
cannot, and then we would inform them of any direction that's as a result of that meeting.
Okay, we'll bring that up as well. Paul also talked about engaging our local business sector. Do we wish to provide some direction to Mr. Spratt on reaching out to our local business sector, or is the ad and all the other information going to be enough? Councillor Duncan?
My suggestion would be that Mr. Pratt could probably forward any newspaper ad or news release onto his contacts as well, and we could achieve a larger audience that way.
Okay. Do we need a motion for that, administration, or that's clear enough? Any other comments or ideas? Councillor Laird?
Perhaps we should be contacting our local Chamber of Commerce. We've got 3 of them. I think it's important that they be aware of what's happening as well, and that way they also have their additional contacts, perhaps across the province. That's a large group of people that reaches to the businesses, and I think it's important that they are engaged.
Yes. Deputy Reeve Swanson.
So to add to your email list, please send it on to our local West Central stakeholders group as well.
Councillor Laird.
I know we're brainstorming. Is there a potential opportunity that we reach out to the leader of the opposition as well?
Well, if we're CCing the Premier and the ministers on any letters, I believe we should also CC the Leader of the Opposition. And perhaps the critic of municipal affairs as well. Any further comments? Seeing none, I will adjourn the meeting at 9:42 a.m. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, I'm signing off.
John, just wait 1 second. We have to talk.